On your Wednesday episode of Locked On Raptors, the Raptors didn't trade for Jakob Poeltl at the deadline. They traded for Shaquille O'Neal, apparently. We'll dig into Jakob Poeltl's incredible 30-point, 6-block game against the Magic and how he's making everybody on the Raptors just a little bit better on today's episode of Locked On Raptors. Thanks so much for hanging.
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? Welcome to episode number 1343 of Locked On Raptors for Wednesday, February the 15th. I'm your host, Sean Woodley. I've been covering the Toronto Raptors now for 9 seasons on various platforms. You can find all of my work over on Twitter at WoodleySean. You can follow the show at Locked On Raptors, and you can subscribe to, rate, and review the podcast for free on your audio podcast app of choice. We are, of course, also on YouTube. You can go hit the big red subscribe button over there, and it's very much appreciated when you support the show on the tube. I believe we passed the 2,900 subscriber threshold. Let's push that to 3K. Shall we? All right. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at PrizePicks. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code LOCKEDON. That's prizepicks.com, promo code LOCKEDON. All right, on today's show, the Toronto Raptors take down the Orlando Magic 123-113, and Jakob freaking Poeltl, baby. 30 points, 9 boards, 2 assists, 1 steal, 6 blocks, 15 of 17 from the field. We will dig all into Jakob Poeltl, why he himself is awesome, why he makes the other players on the Raptors more awesome. We've also got the good, the bad, and the to get into as well as we go on throughout today's show. But let's just dive in off the top here to Jakob Poeltl and what makes him just so bloody good and what a breath of fresh air he has been for the Raptors so far in his very short time with the team. I think obviously, the first couple games kind of getting his feet under him, but it was very clear when he was on the floor, this dude's helping. This dude's addressing problems the Raptors have, even if they're maybe not using him in the way that you'd love to see, the ideal sort of deep drop defense. He still does so much to address things that the Raptors have been lacking for literally years now that, even if they're not using him in the optimal way just yet, he's still doing everything to help this team. And look, I don't want to go and say that they go 2-1 against the Jazz, Pistons, and Magic and suggest that the season is saved or anything like that. Although the Magic, a better win than the record would indicate. They've been pretty good of late. I think 17 and 15 in the last 32 now. They've been a top 10 defense since December the 1st. Like, what the Raptors did to them last night, legitimately impressive, specifically on the offensive end. But overall, I mean, just how can you not love the stuff Jakob Poeltl brings to the table? He's just such a jolt of refreshment into what we're seeing the team doing. We're seeing the vibes return, it seems. There's smile and joy. Our pal Vivek Jacob last night, suggesting that there was singing going on in the Raptors locker room with Precious Achiuwa and Chris Boucher, something we haven't really got wind of all season long. Post-game joy for the Raptors. And I am starting to feel, not that, again, it's 3 games, it's bad competition, all of that, but the eye test, the way things look on the floor, Jakob Poeltl feels like he might just fix most of the things the Raptors had been struggling with for most of the season. Is it too late to turn things around and make it an earnest run at the 6th seed? Maybe, and that's unfortunate. It's a bummer they had to make the deal so late in the year. Obviously, would have been great to do that in December or early January, but they have him now. And boy, is he a delight. And again, we'll get into a second to sort of the things he does to make others better. We'll talk about Fred VanVleet, Pascal Siakam, Scottie Barnes, those sort of interconnected relationships on the floor. But just the individual skills Jakob Poeltl brings all address such dire needs for the Raptors. In particular, the spacing, and it's a different kind of spacing, right? There's obviously the way we talk about spacing in the NBA these days. It's all, well, okay, you got 3-point shooters. It's the gravity that they have and the space that opens up. NBA floor is pretty big space, and there's lots of little pockets of space inside the arc to exploit, and that is where Jakob Poeltl seems to be just an absolute wizard. He's so light on his feet and has such a great knack for seeping into the empty spaces that aren't occupied, that offer outlets to guys who might run into trouble on their drives, things like that. he's just such a mechanism of keeping the offense flowing, whether it's seeping into space to get a look, a little float shot up, which he had a ton of last night, or whether it's seeping into space and then to make a connective pass out of whatever the outlet, pass is to him. He just, where he occupies space and the way he kind of interprets how each player on the floor, how they're going to dictate the space that then he can go and occupy. It's really impressive, man. And it's, again, basketball, all pro sports, all team sports are about finding space and exploiting it. And it doesn't necessarily matter where the space is as long as there is space to occupy. And I think Jakob Poeltl just has a great knack for doing that without being a classic three-point shooter. He's so good at not clogging the lane, for example. He's just, I tweeted this last night, he might be a Hall of Famer of knowing where to stand. The old Patrick Redford from Defector sort of just the way of discussing basketball players and how half the battle is knowing where to stand. Jakob Poeltl knows the hell where to stand and where not to stand and how to affect the game by where he stands. He's such a great target for the ball, right? You see, a possession might break down. Maybe a dribbler runs into long, thickets of my Orlando Magic arms, which, boy, oh boy, the Magic have arms everywhere. It was a difficult night for the Raptors to operate. Of course, all the turnovers they had in this one, 18 turnovers. It speaks to what the Magic do to give you problems. But the way that Jakob Poeltl was able to, again, just kind of get into those areas where he can be that outlet when guys do run into trouble, just incredible stuff. You factor in the incredible touch. That float shot is money. We thought Kem Birch had a float shot. This is a floater, and it's a really impressive weapon for Yak to be able to exploit. I do kind of wonder if that shot was born out of maybe his desire to not get fouled because his free throws have been historically a big challenge. And if that's his counter to that, all right, I'm not going to drive here. I'm just going to put this floater up and it's going to be money 70% of the time. Pretty good way to work around a lack of free throw shooting, although he's been better this season, around 60%, which is nice and potentially important down the line. The way he just the footwork with him, man, it's twinkle toes on both ends of the floor, right? He is able to, again, even though they're not using him necessarily defensively in like the ideal circumstance, like they're not having him play deep drop. He's coming up to the perimeter, the level of the screen quite often. A couple instances where he got caught out, got blown by a Wendell Carter Jr. or a Markelle Fultz in certain spots, but also had plenty of times where he was wonderful sticking with a Franz Wagner or a Paolo Banchero in this game. He had a massive block on Franz in the fourth quarter, sticking with him in lockstep all the way from the top of the arc down to the basket, angling him perfectly to just swat it away. It's the little stuff that he does that just makes everything just kind of tick a little bit more. Honestly, watching Jakob Poeltl kind of get thrown into this team, it's almost like, have you ever seen this? This will happen on TV or something where you're like looking at a piece of art and the art looks weird and it turns out that it's sideways, and then you flip it and then it's like, oh, the art makes sense to me. It's kind of what adding a real center has done to this Raptors team. It makes sense again. There's role definition. There is, a guy who sort of connects all the different pieces of the lineup. It's not these five sort of unconnected parts trying to work together in some sort of broken harmony. Jakob Poeltl is able to tie it all together with a sweet little bow, and we're going to make the Marc Gasol comparisons a ton, I'm sure, just because he's the first center they've had that does things Marc Gasol does since they had Marc Gasol. Very different players, obviously, not the same thing, but what was the arrival of Marc Gasol? What did that coincide with for the Raptors back in 2019? It was, you've taken this sort of Kawhi Leonard-centric offense, you've taken this Kyle Lowry-driven offense, and you've melded them together with Marc Gasol, that sort of interconnective piece. That is what Jakob Poeltl is doing so far for the Raptors. The Raptors have been killing when he's on the floor so far. The starting lineup that they've rolled out the last couple of games of Fred, Scottie Barnes, Pascal Siakam, Precious, and Poeltl is a plus 18 overall in 43 minutes. That's outstanding. The Raptors' defense when he's on the floor right now is a 103.6 defensive rating. That is right in line with where the Raptors have performed with Christian Koloko on the floor this season. And obviously, Poeltl does a whole lot of other stuff to help juice the offense. The Raptors have 124.1 offensive rating with him on the floor. They're a plus 27 overall with him on the floor so far in his short time with the team. And it's like very clear when he's on the floor, things make a lot more sense. It's a delight, I think he's also, yeah, again, he's kind of injected a certain joy into this team, which has been lacking. And I do wonder if that joy of just like, oh man, look at how fun this guy is to play with. Fred VanVleet smiling away, has a real pick and roll partner to play with. Pascal Siakam's playing with his buddy. We'll get into some of the lineup connotations that might come when the Raptors are whole again, when Gary Trent Jr. and OG Anunoby are back, and how even Jakob Poeltl might help harmonize that situation, which has been weird and tension filled on the floor all season long. Not necessarily in a bad way, just in like kind of a goopy, ugly way. Yak, I think, stands a chance of helping that too. Does the fun go a long way to addressing the sort of season-long chemistry concerns? Possible. Like, this is kind of always the thing with chemistry and sort of team vibes and whatnot. It's like, what comes first? Winning? Does winning precede good vibes, or do good vibes precede winning? It might be that winning just makes so everyone's kind of happy and that the vibes are good again. And I think he's just, man, I'm gushing. I'm gushing over having a real center to watch the Raptors play basketball with. Again, it's just the Magic. It's just a 1-point win over the Pistons. It's a loss to the Utah Jazz in embarrassing fashion since he came to town. But it's very clear this team is playing differently and looks more cohesive and like a real actual basketball team with him on the floor. The efficiency, obviously, the touch around the basket, 15 of 17. What a great addition to the Raptors repertoire, right? They've been a better team getting to the rim this season, scoring and close, but they've just not really had anyone you can count on time and time again to get to the rim, score in those easy areas. And Jakob Poeltl is just constantly there waiting to score in those areas. It's fantastic. We're going to come back on the other side, get into why Jakob Poeltl is enhancing other guys' games, in particular, how he's making Fred VanVleet a bloody pick-and-roll maestro. We'll get to that in just 1 second here, but first, got to tell you about our friends over at Prize Picks, who have made daily fantasy sports fun, easy, and accessible. It's a wonderful way to do it. You don't have to go with the season-long grind of setting your lineup every day. You just get to go in, fire up an entry for each given day with whatever the lineup is in the NBA or any other sport you want to partake in, and enter 2 to 6 players. All you're doing is picking whether they're going to get more or less than their projected stats. For example, Jakob Poeltl probably going to be projected most of the time in like the teens, the low double digits for points. Slap that over, baby. Say he's going to hit more than 12.5 points or whatever he's set at, and you're probably going to be in pretty good shape if the Raptors keep on playing through him this way. You can, again, 2 to 6 entries. You can win up to 25 times your money on any entry if you get them all right. It's super easy. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less, and they have safe and fast withdrawals. Currently operational in over 30 states and in Canada and every province except for Ontario at the moment. Download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. If you deposit $100, Prize Picks will give you $100 poof into your account. What a wonderful deal. Don't forget to enter the promo code Locked On at sign up for instant deposit match up to $100 with Prize Picks. All right, we continue on here with your first listen of the day as we continue on the Jakob Poeltl propaganda half hour. It's really fun to watch a new guy. It's a delight to see what one dude can do to kind of change the tone and tenor of a season of a team. And again, I know it's just the Magic, and you're probably being like, Sean, what are you doing? It's been 3 games. This is nothing. But like, I don't know. We've been grasping at straws for something joyous to watch all season long. I'm going to enjoy the hell out of it while I can. And I think, again, there's a lot of reason to be optimistic about what this can be going forward. And I think a big part of that is how Jakob Poeltl makes those around him better. And like, full stop, he makes those around him better. That is the mark of an excellent basketball player is, yes, obviously all these guys are incredibly talented on their own, but how do they impact the games of other players on the floor? And we talked on yesterday's show about the screening that Jakob Poeltl provides, or we've talked about it a couple times this week. The screening he provides, the extra space that's there to be, used by a Fred VanVleet or a Pascal Siakam, whomever he's screening for. That's incredible. He's also, again, like the way he's just a massive target, the way he can be a traditional good rolling big man who can finish around the basket, who can make plays on the short roll. The plays on the short roll, baby. It's just like, oh God, there's a cutter there. There's a guy, screaming in from the 45 there. It's all beautiful. And I think obviously the guy who's benefiting the most right now is Fred VanVleet, because Fred VanVleet It's like someone who didn't realize they were an outstanding musician, just kind of had the natural inclination for it, and then all of a sudden they get gifted a guitar at age 29 and start wailing away. It's kind of like what Fred VanVleet's going through right now, being granted a pick and roll big man to work with for the first time, really, in his career as a lead ball handling guard. Back to the Marc Gasol days, he was more of an off-ball player in those days, right? He wasn't running a ton of pick and roll. They had Kyle Lowry and Pascal Siakam for that. And ever since then, I feel like it's undeniable that Fred's development as a pick and roll ball handler has been stunted because he's been attempting to throw lobs to Aaron Baines and not so ready Precious Achiuwa and whomever else they've been throwing out at center. The chemistry with Jakob Poeltl is clear. Yak is a beautiful target for Fred to try to hit. Obviously, Fred's always going to be up against length. You saw last night against the Magic. There were a lot of times last night where the length of the Magic gave Fred trouble. He had to pick up his dribble. And yet, because Yak is such a massive and accessible and highly presentable target, he's able to feed the ball through an underneath pass or a bounce pass. He can throw it over the top of the double, and Yak is going to be there with those soft hands to clutch it and go from there, whether it's making a play towards the bucket or making the next play along. And you're seeing like 15 assists for Fred VanVleet. That's remarkable. And so many of them were a byproduct of that pick and roll action with Jakob Poeltl. And you figure it's only going to get better as you go forward here, as you get your shooters in OG Anunoby and Gary Trent Jr. back, the extra space, the extra threat those guys are going to offer. Teams not terribly worried right now about, say, Precious Achiuwa or Scottie Barnes bombing threes on them, but you throw a Trent or an OG out there, and things get pretty interesting. We'll talk about the starting lineup later on when we get to the good, the bad, and the and what it should be. I'm not saying this should be the starting lineup necessarily, but a closing lineup for the Raptors could be something like Fred, OG, Gary, Pascal, and Jakob Poeltl. You get tons of shooting out there. You get extra space. You get guys who can make a play with the ball in their hands. That could be a devastating potential closing lineup for the Raptors. And again, it's because Jakob Poeltl enhances everyone around him. It's not just Siakam either, right? Not just Fred either. It's Siakam that Jakob Poeltl is helping out too. He makes the burden on Siakam a lot less than it has been. We know Pascal Siakam over the last couple of seasons has been doubled just about as much as any other star in the league. He's in like the Luka Doncic tier of getting double teamed in terms of frequency. And the Raptors have usually been pretty good working out of those double teams and finding looks, but having Jakob Poeltl there, it just makes it that much easier because he's there to be on the slip and catch you in the short roll and make plays from there in 4-on-3 situations. He, as a roller in the pick and roll with Siakam, he sucks defenders in towards the rim as he's rolling because he's an actual earnest threat, and that creates a little bit more space for Pascal Siakam to get to his office around 15 feet for those quick jab step J's. And Jakob Poeltl helps that, right? Also, credit to Siakam. Last night, it wasn't all that. Last night, it was some ridiculous shot making over really good defense as the Magic, with all of their length and limbs and size, prevented him from getting to his spots that he really wanted to get to. But man, oh man, the shot making from Pascal was ridiculous. 26 points on 15 shots. You love to see that. The combined 25 of 32 for Jakob Poeltl and Pascal Siakam. Pretty nuts in this one. Crazy efficiency. And again, it's Yak makes everything easier for everybody. He's such a connective piece. And then on defense too, right? Like he makes everybody's lives a little bit easier. He makes it so you can maybe be a little bit more aggressive and jump for that passing lane if you want. Get a little closer into a guy with your chest, because if you get blown by, Jakob Poeltl's probably going to be there to help clean up the mess. There were a few instances last night where there were breakdowns. Obviously 70 points in the first half for the Magic. That second quarter was a disaster class defensively for sure. It's not going to, Rome wasn't built in a day. It's not going to be fixed overnight, but Yak is very clearly going to help solve a lot of the ongoing Raptors problems on defense with the way he shuffles his feet, with the way he's able to just kind of be a back line of defense the way a true rim protector should be. 6 blocks for him. Nuts. Crazy. It's just I'm loving it, man. I think he has an effect on Scottie Barnes as well too, and I think those two guys, they might be the two guys on the team who like see the floor the best and sort of anticipate things coming the best. Obviously, as like a rim protector in Jakob Poeltl, like there's just like that sort of baked in anticipation that comes with conducting a defense, being at the back line, seeing everything develop for, 100 possessions a night over many, many years. There's just that sort of innate understanding of how things develop. Scottie Barnes has that too, where he just constantly kind of sees the next thing almost before other people do. And I think those two guys in particular, their connection is going to be a delight to watch over time here. You'll see Yak hit Pascal or hit Scottie on the baseline in those short rolls with a cut on the baseline. Just like beautiful, perfect, simple pick and roll basketball. That's awesome to see. And the more Jakob Poeltl flashes that floater and his ability to finish from there, the more that's going to open up those baseline cuts and his passing repertoire as well. And then you'll see the other side of it where Scottie and Yak, like Scottie is so great at finding guys in their spots. You saw that the bucket last night against the Magic in the fourth quarter, late in the game as Yak gets to 30 points. It's just Scottie, he spends some time probing, bit of a long possession, dribbling the life out of the ball, but then all of a sudden he makes one move, gets a little bit of a corner turn, whips in a pass to Yak right in his spot. He turns around, puts up the floater, and it's good. Like, that's just, those two guys are on the same page. They see basketball like this and like next level, it seems. There was even an instance early on in the game where Yak kind of was in transition. He kind of slowed up as Scottie was trying to hit him with the pass. I can imagine he's not going to make that mistake again. That feels like the type of thing of two guys learning to play with one another. And those two guys are like basketball savants, really. And I think those two guys playing alongside one another is going to be a delight as we continue to see that work. It's so much easier now for the Raptors ball handlers too, right? As much as Scottie has maybe not been able to occupy that screening role that he was so effective in for the last couple months before the deadline, he's able to now flex his muscles on the ball a little bit more because he actually has a screener there opening up space for him, allowing him to get downhill, turn the corner, whether it's for playmaking reasons or to get to the bucket. I think, that Scottie, the development of Scottie as an on-ball player, which is ultimately where you want to get him to. That hasn't been a strength of the team so far this season. He hasn't been awesome with the ball in his hands, but with Jakob Poeltl, that development track gets a lot easier, even if him sort of screening and working in the middle of the floor is less of a big featured package for them. It's fun, man. I know I'm just gushing, and it's a game against the Magic once again, but it's hard not to look at what we saw last night and not feel very encouraged about what this team could be capable of as they continue to kind of figure things out, get Yak integrated, get their guys back in OG and Trent. The extra shooting they're going to provide is going to be super valuable. We'll talk about those guys. We'll talk about Thad Young's injury. We'll talk about Malachi Flynn turning out in just a sec here as we get into the good, the bad, and the from the game against the Orlando Magic. But we'll do that after we tell you about our friends over at Built Bar, who make the best tasting protein bars in the game. Let me tell you, I'm always someone who struggles with late night snacking, eating horrible foods right before bedtime like a moron. It's something I do. It's one of my vices. I enjoy snacks. And Built Bar is a great way to help me wean off of the bad stuff late at night, because a Built Bar at midnight, just as a thing to fill the hole as a snack, it tastes delicious. It makes me feel like I'm indulging without actually indulging. You get 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, and a whopping 17 grams of protein in your typical Built Bar. A ton of wonderful flavors as well. They've got the Built Bar Puffs, which are, of course, marshmallowy treats. They've got granola bars. They've got all their classic regular flavors. Peanut butter brownie remains, I think, top tier for me. But there's plenty of others to try out there as well. So go pick them up. You can go to your nearest Walmart today, walk to the pharmacy section, and pick yourself up a box of Built Bars. You got cookies and cream, double chocolate, coconut puffs. It's all there. Go to your local Walmart to pick yourself up some Built Bars. All right, let's round it out here. Your final segment here on your first listen of the day. The good, the bad, and the from the Raptors win over the Orlando Magic to send them off into the deadline 28-31 on a winning note. Love to see that. Won 5 of 6, by the way. The schedule's been very easy. They should have won 5 of 6, but 5 of 6 nonetheless. That's encouraging stuff. They sit 9th in the Eastern Conference right now. Let's get to the good. The good for me in this one, Malachi Flynn. Like, one of the more impressive bench performances I've seen from Malachi Flynn in quite some time. I feel like the thing for me with Flynn is he just never seems like he has any ideas. He's just kind of out there nothing will happen for long stretches when he has the ball. Obviously, he'll get those into those moods where he's happy to catch and shoot it a whole bunch, but he felt like he was actually putting his imprint on the game in this one in a more direct way. He had that beautiful and one in sort of semi-transition. That was great. 10 points, 2 boards, 1 assist, 3 of 4 from the field, 2 of 3 from deep. A perfect Malachi Flynn game, and I am excited to see if they start to work him a little bit more in that pick and roll combo with Jakob Poeltl. We've seen the Fred Yak duo and how much it seems Fred's enjoying that. If Fred were a foot taller, I think he'd kiss Jakob Poeltl. He's so bloody excited to have him on the team. Malachi Flynn might be the same. Again, coming out of college, he was the preeminent pick and roll ball handler in the entirety of the NCAA. That's his bag. I'm still skeptical of the shot making and just like his general size and strength as an NBA player, but there is going to be hope here for him as a rotation piece, as a backup point guard option next season to make it so the Raptors don't have to go out and find someone to do that or have that be a thing that's kind of a constant hole on the team. Malachi Flynn working with Jakob Poeltl, working in these lineups where he's not overtaxed, where he's not being asked to create a whole bunch, where he's just kind of there to fill in the gaps, play solid on-ball defense on guards. That's been, that was really nice to see against the Magic. We have to see it more, obviously, before I fully buy in to the Malachi Flynn redemption arc or anything like that. But really encouraging stuff to see from him last night with 10 points in 13 minutes. The bench contributions the Raptors have desperately been looking for all season long, and they got a couple of them last night. Chris Boucher also really good. And by the way, a quick shout out to Jeff Doughton Jr., who, poor guy, comes in, plays incredible on-ball defense. He might be the best defensive guard the Raptors have right now. Had that steal on Markelle Fultz late in the third quarter, misses the pull-up 3, which would have been just a wonderful way to finish off that quarter of really, really strong, good defense from the Raptors. But nonetheless, you get some fun little stretches there from Jeff Doughton. Nice to see he's getting some looks. Delano Banton, I'm a little less convinced of as an NBA player right now. But Malachi Flynn, you're clear good with an honorable mention to our pal, Jeff Doughton Jr. Let's get to the bad, shall we? Thad Young getting hurt. Not great. Kind of came up. I don't know if we've gotten a full report. We might have by the time this posts as to what's going on, but he obviously sprained knee or strained knee, whatever it is. Figure it's going to be at least a little bit till we see Thad Young again. And that's tough. Thad, I know, has kind of had mixed reviews as far as what he's done for the team this season. There have been some stretches where he's looked pretty rough. There have also been some stretches where he's looked really good and very cohesive, kind of in a similar vein, honestly, to Jakob Poeltl. Different style, obviously. He's not the rim protector Jakob Poeltl is, but as a connector, he's there. And he's fascinating to watch on this team, especially when he's playing with better players. And he's been a decent backup center option. This is the place you got to play Thaddeus Young. He has been a backup center at his during the peaks of his career in recent years, his sort of late career resurgence. Those peaks have come with him being a backup center, and he's been, I think, a pretty decent option there. As they've not really used a ton of Precious or Scottie Barnes as the nominal backup center to Yak so far. I think there is. Lots to like about what Thad brings to that position. It's just if he's not going to be in there, that just takes away an option, right? And I think you got to get a little bit creative. The creative thing is not playing Delano Banton. If this opens up more Delano Banton minutes, I'm a little concerned just because I don't think Delano Banton is ready for NBA ball right now and may never be, honestly. It's a bummer. I'm rooting for him, but he doesn't do a single role player thing very well. The G League ball dominance is great. Awesome to see when a guy can dominate in the G League, but he can't seem to do that stuff away from the ball other than run in transition, which he's great at. It's just a little tough for me as a watch right now. I'd almost rather see a Juancho or even a Joe Wieskamp get a look there in place of those Delano Banton minutes. So that's going to be a fascinating thing to see what happens if Thad misses time. How do they go about filling in those? It's not a ton of rotation time he's occupying right now, but how do you fill in those backup center minutes? Is it just playing more Scottie Barnes at center? Is it just playing more Precious Achiuwa at center? We'll see, but not great. Don't love to see Thad Young get hurt, especially when he's been playing some pretty decent ball of late in a position that's kind of accentuating his strengths. Let's get now to the and the is, I think, a question on a lot of people's minds right now, which is who starts once the Raptors are healthy? For me, I think this is pretty clear, honestly, and I think it's got to be OG running in there and replacing Precious in the starting five they've run out the last couple nights. Again, that lineup's been very good It's been awesome to see, but add a little bit more shooting in there, and I feel like it could really sing. And OG, the defense that he'll provide, you replace the Precious defense. By the way, Precious, awesome defensively last night. 11 points and 13 boards, but I think really the most impressive thing was just like sticking with Paolo Banchero and, the wing defense he offers. Wing Precious, the defense there is going to be pretty sweet. And I think any combination where you compare him and OG together in between lineups, that's going to be devastating defensively. Try scoring on that duo on the wings. Quite a set of dudes to throw at any set of very good wings on another team. Besides the point, OG, I think you put into the starting five. Fred, OG, Scottie, Pascal, Poeltl. If that pops, that gives you maybe some clarity on what you do in the offseason, right? If that lineup really sings, if Yak really is the guy who ties it together, OG maybe gets a little bit more room to participate on offense with no Gary Trent Jr. on the floor. He can be like your 3.5 offensive option, at least scoring wise. Scottie will probably have the ball in his hands more, but he's obviously in playmaker mode quite often. Maybe that allows you to accentuate OG's role, give him the sort of expanded opportunity he's looking for, while also just kind of putting out a pretty kick-ass lineup. And then the bench, you kind of go with Gary Trent Jr., Precious Achiuwa, Chris Boucher as your core three, and then Thad Young if healthy, Malachi Flynn, sort of your next options to mix in. I think that could be a pretty viable rotation for the Raptors. And, I know the sort of concern here is, will Gary Trent Jr. rebuff at the idea of moving to the bench full time? And I almost wonder, have we not given Gary Trent Jr. enough credit for his buy-in this season? Because I think he's actually been one of the more bought-in Raptors. He's kind of exterminated a lot of the more sort of gunner-ish tendencies of his game. He's very much playing within the flow more often than not. And when he's not, it's usually because they badly need him to bail them out late in the clock. He's obviously gotten the critiques from Nick Nurse and responded quite well. When he was coming off the bench, he was super keen and happy about that and made no stink. He said all the right things all along. And the reporting suggests that actually him and the Raptors are kind of on the same page about him coming back. I wonder if a 6-man role for Gary Trent Jr., which coming into the season was a thing a lot of us, I think, really wanted to see, maybe that is ultimately where he ends up, and maybe he's happy with that. Maybe that's something the Raptors can roll with going forward. If their plan is to bring most of their guys back here, maybe, and even just if it's for the rest of this season, I think there's some potential there for Gary Trent Jr. to be awesome at a bench role. And it's not like he won't play heavy minutes, right? The way, if you're going to run an 8.5 man rotation, 9 man at the best, if you're going to do that, there's going to be plenty of opportunity for Gary Trent Jr. to play heavy minutes. He's going to close some games, obviously. There are going to be nights where, Scottie Barnes isn't warranting the closing, duties, or OG's not, or Jakob Poeltl's, getting exposed in a mismatch, or he's getting hacked and you need to take him out. There's going to be times where Gary Trent Jr. gets to close games, even if he's coming off the bench. He's going to play close to starters' minutes, I would assume, something around 30 minutes a night. The way that will help trim off the minutes load of the other guys, super valuable as well. I think there might be something here for the Raptors to roll with that Gary, Precious, Boucher trio off the bench with whomever else you want to, stagger in there. Ideally starters, but if you want to throw a Flynn or a Thad, I understand. Maybe there's something there. Maybe, just maybe, Gary Trent Jr. is the 6th man who was promised for this Raptors team, and it just needed the arrival of Jakob Poeltl to make everybody see, oh, that's the thing that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, I think just maybe a little bit more credit to Gary Trent Jr. as an adaptable dude who will buy into what's going on. I know he kind of gives off this aura of a gunner who's unconscious and wants to just kind of take shots and ask questions later. It's not really been his MO, as much as that's maybe the reputation he carries. And I think pretty cool to imagine what it'll look like with Gary Trent Jr. as like an ace 6-man coming off the bench to give those in-between lineups some offensive punch and potentially stagger into some closing lineups as well. Again, that Fred, OG, Gary, Pascal, Yak lineup could be one of their best, honestly. The way it just makes sense conceptually, I think it would be pretty cool to see, as much as it would pain me to see Scottie Barnes not close games, because Scottie Barnes, pretty damn rad as well. All right, that's going to do it for this extremely positive episode of Locked On Raptors. I know there's still concern, should they have made the trade for Jakob Poeltl? Oh my God, the protections on the pick. By the way, the protections on the pick, I know process-wise it's not ideal to have only 1 through 6 protected next year going into a season where we're not sure if they're going to be a playoff team or not. But Thinking back to the transaction history of Jakob Poeltl, they got him, of course, the pick that they used to draft him was what they got in return for Andrea Bargnani, in addition to some other guys. Shout out Steve Novak. And then you trade Jakob Poeltl in the Kawhi Leonard trade, an all-time fleecing that wins you a championship, and then you get Jakob Poeltl back. I feel like a 1-6 protection in lieu of a lottery protection is a perfectly reasonable tax for the Raptors to have paid for all of the fleecings in Jakob Poeltl's recent transaction history involving the Raptors. So as much as it's not great process-wise, I've already made my peace with it. Maybe I'm just a giant mark. I am a giant mark for a center who ties things together and throws cool passes, to be totally honest about it. But I do think, ultimately, the cost is what it is. I'm going to enjoy what he's doing now and figure out the offseason stuff later. That's a problem for future Raptors, for future Sean, whatever. Right now, I'm going to enjoy the fun hoops, and Jakob Poeltl certainly is doing a lot to make the hoops more fun in Toronto. We will be back tomorrow with Mark Schindler of The Athletic as we'll talk more about Jakob Poeltl and his fit within the Raptors. It's been a blast to watch Yak this week. I'm excited to talk about Mark, who I know is very high on the Poeltl edition as well. Surely feeling vindicated after the 39-2-1-6 on 15 of 17 game Yak put in last night. Again, Yaquille O'Neal, Yak Diesel, whatever you want to call him. He's it. It's great. We're going to wrap it there. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please follow, subscribe to, rate, and review the podcast for free on your favorite podcast apps. And of course, we are on YouTube. Please go and subscribe to the YouTube channel if you have not already. It's very much appreciated. It's free to do. It's very helpful when you do it. So please go ahead and just hit that red subscribe button. Even if you're not going to watch the videos, just let them run in the background on mute. That's fine. I don't care. Just help juice the stats, baby. That's it. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. In the meantime, go make your second listen of the day. Locked On Leafs as the Buds. Timo Meier? Are they going to go after Timo Meier at the trade deadline? That sure would be fun. Mike and Dave will have it all broken down on Locked On Leafs for you each and every day. Go check them out. Until then, we'll talk to you tomorrow. Until then, bye-bye. Have a good one.